Good evening. This is the People's View for Halloween, October 31, 2019. With me are my good friends, Steve Negrin, candidate for Congress, Kevin Avord, candidate for Alderman, Barbara Griffin, who's in the State House, former chair of election law and Speaker Pro Tem, and myself, Bill Ohm. I was a former state rep. So today we have a couple of scary topics to talk about, one of which is the election law that might require certain college students to have to be a resident in order to vote and comply with driver's licenses and registering your car. That's got to be a scary thought, Barbara. Is that the case in this bill?
Well, some people claim it is, and some presidential candidates are even scared away from it. I understand Elizabeth Warren is big on saying that our laws are terrible, even though the state she comes from requires such things. It's pretty amazing.
It does. In yesterday's Telegraph, the quote from her campaign was, "The lack of clarity from the Secretary of State's office has left a lot of confusion in college campuses across the state."
I don't think the Secretary of State's confused at all.
No. Right. Well, somebody's confused, and I think the confusion is how I can vote but not be a resident. That's the confusion.
A little incident that happened to me. You know I have a small carpet cleaning business. I was in Drake maybe 8 weeks ago, something to that effect, cleaning a carpet. We're talking politics with the mother, and you know she of all things, she's a Trump supporter. I thought, okay, this is interesting. You're in Massachusetts, but anyway, we're having a conversation, and her son walks into the room, and sure enough, he just graduated from a college in New Hampshire, actually from Franklin Pierce up in Ringe in my district, and we're having a conversation. And I said, oh, so but you didn't happen to vote, did you? He said, oh yeah. I said, so you voted in New Hampshire, but you're still a Massachusetts resident? He said, yeah. I said, oh, that's interesting. So tell me about it. And he said, yeah, well, they not bust us in, but they shuttled us in. And apparently, according to the local people there were about 200, maybe 250 same-day registrations coming from the college. That's a huge concern in our state. What I don't think that the college students do is they don't understand their rights. They don't understand that if you register in New Hampshire to vote, you're now a New Hampshire citizen, right? Is that how it's supposed to work?
About the right and the obligation.
And the
you
obligation.
Have the right to vote. Absolutely have the right to vote. The question is, where do you vote? I mean, my simple solution to that is, well, go into your pocket and pull out your driver's license. And what state is that?
Right.
Right.
Because you certainly have the right to vote there, either absentee or in person.
Right. Yeah, nobody's stopping them from voting, but you're kind of an expert on this. So what are their rights? What are the students' rights? If they vote in New Hampshire, are they now a New Hampshire citizen?
Well, I think you're a U.S. citizen. I'm not sure we're New Hampshire citizens, just for clarity, because words start to mean
You're
a lot
in
election law.
Gotcha.
So the issue when you vote in New Hampshire is, what else does it mean?
Okay.
And in the 49 other states, when you vote, it means that you live there. The term that you and I would talk about when we'd say, where do you live? Mm-hmm. You might remember when you were in college, where do you live? Nobody ever said, I live in the dorm across the quad. They all said where their home was, right? So it's where you live. And there are these words called domicile and residence that have popped up in our Constitution with some amendments, and they've been sort of the source of a lot of the back and forth over whether you can vote or not vote in New Hampshire. And it's pretty clear that your client's son had the right to go and register on that day and vote in New Hampshire.
Correct.
The problem with 1264 for a lot of people is that what it does is it makes the motor vehicle laws consistent with voting laws, in that you're now living here, so you need to register your car within 30 days like everybody else. So when you buy a house or you move to an apartment, you change your license. That's what you're supposed to do. And so what it says is essentially, getting an apartment is a sign that you live here, and so is voting. And other states recognize that. Other states, actually, when they've received notice that people have voted here, have taken them off the rolls in their state, right, and have said that you no longer qualify for a driver's license in this state because now you voted in the other state. And the person's position is usually, but I just voted there. I didn't move there, right? I still want my license from the other state. And most of the other states will then say, sorry, no, you voted.
So
You're not here
that's the
anymore.
issue. That's what I wanted to get out of this is the fact that that person potentially has no longer a valid Massachusetts driver's license.
Right, and I know of a particular instance, it wasn't Massachusetts, but in that particular case, when they would go to renew it, they would be told no.
Right. I spoke at the well on this very topic, and it was about, and I used the word binary, right? Either you're a resident of the state of New Hampshire for everything, right? You don't get to pick and choose. This isn't a la carte, right? You can say, I want to do this for New Hampshire, I want to do this for Maine, I want to do this for New Hampshire, I want to do this for Maine. It's either everything or all or nothing. And so that was really the point. And then when Madam Chair, she was a chairwoman, when I was in election law, was that they thought that we were making it disenfranchised. It was the first time I ever heard this word.
Right.
Now I can't get rid of it out of my head. It's disenfranchising these students. And, as somebody who was in a service, and I absentee voted my entire career, right? It's not a difficult thing to do. And if it was so important for these college students to exercise their constitutional right, then they should have found a way to find a voting office, somebody to help them vote from the state that they were in. And I think that was the rub, and then they called it a poll tax, because if you had to register, right, and pay for your license, and that was somehow equating you to being able to vote. So, they got very angry with Barbara, because Barbara held firm, and I think it was a phenomenon. She took them on. And so if you ask anybody in a very C-spot run, very simplistic way, everybody will agree with you that you should vote in the state that you live in, right? And nobody, and they try to corner us when they say, well, you're not allowing them to vote. To your point, right? Not at all. Vote from the state for where your parents probably claim you on their taxes. It's really.
Yeah, my next door neighbor, he's voting for me for alderman. He sent me a text today because he can't be in town. Hey, I just voted for you through absentee. It's not that hard.
Right.
You just got to take the initiative. But I think one of the things that the students need to get the message, what's going to happen to you now that you potentially change your domicile or your residency?
Well, and let's be clear, we're not just talking about students. You happen to have a client and her son voted because he was a student. We have lots of people in this state that are here on a temporary basis and they may or may not vote, right? I mean that it's not just students. We have a lot of vacation property. We just had a special election earlier this month. There are special elections occur throughout the year. There might be people here who would, under what some people interpret the law, be able to go vote in that election because at that current time they're at the summer camp on the lake or wherever they are.
Right.
Right. So it can be anybody. It really is a question of, doesn't it make sense that you want people voting where they have a real interest?
Skin in the game.
Skin in the game. Yeah. And to your point about the poll tax argument, just to be clear, because people throw that around, poll taxes actually did exist, primarily in the South, in one might argue very Democrat states. And a poll tax is something you have to do before you vote.
Right.
So a poll tax would be a fee that you needed to pay before you voted, or in some cases they used to actually have tests that people would have to take that would effectively act like a poll tax and keep people out from voting. So the requirement that you have to register your car because you've done something to indicate that you have moved to New Hampshire is clearly not a poll tax.
It's
you
post.
didn't have to do anything before you voted.
Right.
So, people throw these terms around and they're just not applicable. I think some of the confusion is that the change 1264 was to the DMV law in regards to your being here in the state. And DMV indicated in some questions that they didn't plan on changing their procedures. Right? And so from a voting standpoint, people were like, well, I'm confused. If we're making this change and it affects voting laws, what do you mean they're not making any change in their procedure? Well, the change in the law wasn't to do that. So
I think
there's no confusion.
Senator French was toying with the idea. I don't know if he actually did this or not, but he basically put out the idea that if you're going to vote in New Hampshire, then you should be eligible for in-state tuition.
Right. I remember that came up because we said, well, that's clearly a threshold to determine whether you're in state or not. But no, that's too high of a threshold.
Well, and if you go to other states like California because I know somebody who happened to move there and got a hold of the registration form to vote. I mean, it was unbelievable. And then to do anything for tuition was also unbelievable. I mean, quite frankly, I know forms are horrible and they're hard and they're complicated, but we're not very strict on a lot of requirements. And just to be clear, tuition eligibility is set by the University Board of Trustees. The legislature has no control over what that is. I suspect if the legislature did have control over it, it might be different standards.
Sure.
Why don't we talk a bit about what the current situation is, Barbara, because we've had this bill that passed and we've had these lawsuits that are going on. What is today's situation when it comes to registering to vote?
You register to vote in New Hampshire just like you always have. SB 3, which was in effect at the elections last fall, is not in effect right now. There was an injunction at the Superior Court level. We're being sued by the Democrat Party, individuals who have been found out of state, a couple of out of state Dartmouth College students. League of Women Voters has joined in, I believe, on one of the lawsuits. There's a lawsuit in regards to SB 3 and HB 1264. So you register to vote the same way, and frankly, there really wasn't much of a change anyways. You can register to vote on the day you go to the polls. 1264 is in effect. That's under litigation right now. That's in federal court. So, you know, how it plays out over the course of the litigation is unsure, but basically you continue to register to vote like you always did, and you can do same-day voting. You walk in. If you don't have anything with you, you can do an affidavit, but 1264 is in effect in regards to the fact that motor vehicle laws have changed such that voting is an indication that your driver's license should be here.
Okay, so anybody who's not registered can register the same day, next Tuesday, come in and vote, get a ballot, have that ballot count, not be put aside, and be franchised here in New Hampshire.
Right, and what's so interesting about that is Senator Warren, who sort of chimed in on all this confusion, in her state, if you came in with nothing, that ballot would be put aside.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, speaking about the congressional candidates and the presidential candidates and recent developments in the House, we had an interesting vote today in the Congress, in
We
the
did.
House. And what's your thoughts on that?
Well, we knew that this was the next step in the game that the Democrats were gonna play and bring this up, and it's just their way of putting things in place. So you know there were two Democrats that didn't vote along with the party line. We knew that was going to happen, and quite frankly, go ahead.
Well, we should talk about what actually happened today, and then we can analyze it.
Sure. So it was
So
a vote
what
on
happened today?
on the process and the procedures for impeachment.
Okay.
That's what it was. It wasn't the articles of impeachment. Yeah. So this is like putting the framework together, and it was a party line vote, except for those two smart Democrats that didn't vote for it. But you know, quite frankly, I'm of the opinion, go down this path. Absolutely go down. Our two congressional representatives, both Custer and Pappas, voted in favor of this, which was no surprise, based on really no legitimate basis for this. And just remember that this is just the first step, and then it goes to a trial in the Senate, which is controlled by Republicans. So, you know, the Democrats, and this was something that they said, and we talked about on the campaign trail, ROI normally means, you know, return on investment, but in this case, it's resist, obstruct, and impeach. And that's exactly what they've done since they took over in January of 2017. They've passed no significant legislation other than what the president has been able to get through. Everything is about trying to undo the 2016 election. And so, you know, this was no surprise to us. I just think that now there's a lot of people, and Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi, is taking this train off the rails, and they've got no choice now but to continue. Right? There's no way that they can back out of this right now. So all the lemmings are just going off the edge. Let them, and so we're going to see what happens as this next step goes and unfolds. So,
Now, you've announced your intention to compete against Ann McLean Custer in the
yes,
CD2.
I did. Right.
So, so how would you vote on this kind of topic?
Certainly, this would have been a nay. You know, and it doesn't mean that I don't believe in the process of impeachment, but there better be a basis for it. And what we've seen now, clearly on many occasions, that it's just it's this almost smoke and mirrors kind of thing. And I agree with everybody who says that nobody's above the law, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. But you have to break the law. You can't manufacture it. I don't know who it was. It was Stalin or somebody said, bring me an innocent person. and I'll find them guilty of something. And that's what's happening right now, and they just can't. And so I believe this is going to backfire on the Democrats. I believe that this is going to backfire on both Chris Pappas and Ann Custer, because we in the state of New Hampshire, we're going to keep that in the front and center, and we're going to have to ask them, justify why you thought this was the right thing on behalf of the citizens of New Hampshire, on behalf of the residents of New Hampshire. Why would you do something like that?
Right.
So
Kevin?
it appears as though there's been some rules and guidelines that the Democratic Party has actually followed. However, there is this appearance of fairness
Right.
that is called into question. It seems as though the Chairman Schiff of this whole process can say what witnesses can say and what they can't say, and that seems to be very unfair as far as due process is concerned.
It is.
Seems to be a problem, and I think the underlying thing that's happening right now is this whole idea of fairness.
Right. The problem, Senator, is that normally these activities are held under the Judiciary Committee. All these things are being done under the Intelligence Committee, which is where Adam Schiff is from.
Right.
So you haven't heard, from the congressman from New York, that's the chair of the Judiciary Committee, which is where this is supposed to be promulgated. And so it's interesting now that they're trying to find the right venue where they believe they have the greatest possibility of making or affecting a change. And so, it's not a criminal proceeding at all. However, the fact that you have Congressman Schiff, interrupting witnesses and not allowing cross-examination, I mean, they're treating it like a trial, but it's not. And so it's going to be really interesting to see Jerry Nadler, Congressman Nadler, where he just disappeared. I mean, he's off the radar. Nobody knows where Jerry Nadler is. Nobody's talked about him, and he's the chair of the Judiciary Committee. So Schiff is out there because he's the name du jour right now. And I think that when all the dust settles, that once again this president is going to be exonerated and not going to have anything that's going to prove that he did anything wrong.
Yeah, don't we have a tradition in these kind of proceedings that it's something that you tread very carefully on? That politics is one thing where people may have it out on the floor with tough debates. They may go out for a drink of water afterwards
Sure.
and toast to their good health.
Right?
But when it comes to major policies that affect the overall country, I think like 9/11 when everybody came together and closed the ranks to go after the terrorists. I think after the Civil War, for example, when the Republicans, Abraham Lincoln's party, kind of reconciled with the South and said, look, it's over, soldiers can go home, we want everybody to start their lives again, we're not going to have repercussions. I think we've had great events like that in the past that have led to positive developments for the country overall. But on a case like this, where we're now saying this is really a highly partisan event with a lack of due process, and it's moved from statesmanship to really rough and tumble politics, I think that's inappropriate for this kind of inquiry on impeachment. Wouldn't you think that we'd be better off to just say, look, if there's an evidence of a crime here, well, then present the evidence.
Right.
And let's have a bipartisan look at this,
Right.
as we did with Watergate, and see if this rises up to the point of high crimes and misdemeanors.
Correct. Right. And it is a shame, Bill, that it has become so partisan. Because you already know, it's just like when we were in election law, if there was going to be this hyper-partisan bill, what the vote's going to be, right? It's clear down party lines. The American people deserve the right to understand that there's a process by which the fathers frame this process. But there's a basis for it, and to this day, there's no basis for it, and so they're manufacturing stuff. And
Well, what's so troubling about it is that if you go back through the repeated attempts to oust Trump, and I think that's what you need to characterize them of, it has come out that things have been known by the Democrats, the party in control, before they've been made a part of the ouster process. And that was true with the Supreme Court judge Kavanaugh that we went through, where they knew about a complaint and they let the process and they want to go through. It was true in the initial efforts with Trump and effort coming forward. And now it turns out that this whistleblower, who doesn't qualify for whistleblower protection or status at all by virtue of who he really is, and we can get into the whole changing what is needed to file a report right before the gentleman filed the report, we find out that he had consulted with Schiff either directly or to his office. And that was before the Speaker, who has the power to do so, mysteriously moved this investigation that would have normally gone to Judiciary to Adam Schiff's committee.
Right.
It all
So,
stinks.
so it's pretty clear, if you look at that the Speaker was aware of who the whistleblower was aware of the fact that Adam Schiff had contact with the whistleblower, was aware that was a problem in the whole
Right.
process, and so gave it to Adam Schiff's committee because they could control and then let them
Right.
go forward with the rules to control how it came forward. So it's amazing how their playbook remains the same. And I think, like everybody here, if there's a crime, do it. But in Watergate, there was a crime.
Right.
And with Clinton, there were crimes. I mean, Bill Clinton had
Underwood.
felonies,
Right.
and he was disbarred. And you may have a disagreement as to whether it constituted crimes,
High crime for
misdemeanors
treated
for
fair.
treason,
Right.
but we were starting from an agreed upon criminal act
right.
in all of those cases.
He was able to have his lawyers and,
Right.
and people on his side to defend him, blah, blah, blah. And I think he was treated with much more fairness than
think
our president
everybody
now.
agrees.
And here's the bottom line. Right now, we don't have trade with Mexico and Canada because of it. Our military, their pay, they've got to be taken care of. Things that the general workings of Congress is stifled because they're focusing on this. And it's stifling the country. They want to get this guy, and they're doing everything they can, and they're hurting the country in the peripheral, is the way I look at it.
Yeah, it goes back to Harry Truman. We talked about the Do Nothing Congress and ran on that. Looks like it might be a campaign issue for anyone who might be in Congress.
Didn't they recently vote themselves a raise?
I wasn't there for the
don't
vote,
know.
so I don't
wasn't-
remember.
They didn't
I
call
was
me.
asleep at midnight when that
Yeah.
must have happened.
Well, you're talking about the Do Nothing Congress, and what I have to say, we might be seeing a little bit of repeat in our state, where we have a similar situation. We have a sort of head of state who's of one party. We have control of both chambers in the state by the other party. And I can tell you up at the State House, we're seeing the exact same stuff coming through that was just vetoed and upheld. So it's too bad that the people of this state are going to have their legislators spending their time doing exactly the same thing that they have already done. So not much is going to get done. Now, there are people who think government not doing much is a good thing, and I appreciate that. So I'm not saying that I'm
Their bills, yeah.
opposed to that, but I'm just pointing out that the same effort, the same work on the exact same language for bills is going to go on with, I would predict, if I was to put my cap on, is going to have the same result.
And you know, when the roles was reversed, when we had the Senate and the House in Republican hands, as well as the Executive Council and a Democratic governor, we got things done, even though the budget was vetoed by her, actually. She vetoed her own budget. But we got things done. We still reached across the aisle. We figured it out. We got things done. And I think this polarizing activity is going to hurt our country. And I wonder if that's by design. You know, are they trying to embarrass the president? Or are they just not focused on what the needs of America? What's going on? You know, impeach the guy? Well, you're still going to have Pence. You know, Vice President Pence, who'll carry on the policies. We have to get through this. We've got to. The people have got to speak up, and I think I'm just kind of curious how this is going to affect our local races. How it's going to affect our local politics. Are people just going to sit back at home and do nothing, or are they going to be engaged? You know?
I think this is to a point, Senator, that this issue is the stuff that we're seeing in Congress, and then in a small microcosm here in our state, right, is just undo versus create and provide and present new legislation, right? So everything that Barbara did, and when I was with her in election law, they're not bringing anything new. They just want to undo it. You know, if it was 1624, undo that one. SB3, undo that one. It's all those different things, and we're seeing it at the federal level as well. I mean, they are paralyzed right now. I mean, you cannot get anything done. And even though the president has done some phenomenal things, in spite of all this churn that's happening, imagine if we had a Republican Congress. I mean, he had one for the first 2 years, right? But he had to, we had to drain that portion, if you will. And so this is an individual that these people are. It isn't so much the act. I think they're just so much vehemently against the person, and there's no place for that in Washington.
Yeah, there's a term for that called Trump derangement syndrome.
And the media is part of that, and I think
On a
that's
Halloween day, that seems to be the
That's it. That's right.
Halloween every day now in Congress.
How does the president get things done when he's got the Congress doing this, and he's got a media that is attacking him 24/7? He can't even get fair play in the media, and I think again, that's everything's polarized. Look what happened just recently. We tried to nominate in New Hampshire. This is just speaking of polarizing. We the Attorney General Gordon
Yeah, for the Supreme
for
Court.
the Supreme Court.
Well qualified individual.
Totally well qualified. A gentleman, a statesman, very fair. He's taken time to look into things. When I've asked him to look into things, he was nominated for the Supreme Court, and a partisan display happened in the Executive Council. They shot him down. Why? I know people from the Bar Association are not happy with it. So what's going to happen in the next election? And the next person that's going to be nominated, is it going to be a partisan thing there? This has got to stop. People have got to start working again together.
Sure.
I'm a Republican. I'm proud to be a Republican, but I'm a human being first. And I think that's the thing that people have got to get over, what's going on here. I'm a Democrat. I'm in this silo. I'm a Republican. I'm in this silo. And we're divided so much. I got unfriended today because I support Trump. Well, if you're going to be supported, I'm going to unfriend you. Well, that wasn't a great relationship, obviously.
Right.
I got family members that don't like President Trump, but they're still my family members, and they're still human beings. And you've got to stop, get away from this, because if you identify your relationships with how you view this president, you've lost your soul, because we're human beings, and we're neighbors, and we're countrymen, countrywomen, and we're in this together, and we've got to get beyond this. And we've got to be honest. We've got to be honest with what's being reported. We've got to be honest with the issues. And just because it's not my team that's winning, you got to remember we're neighbors. And I think we're losing that.
Yeah.
Well, our neighbors are going to vote for alderman very shortly. And I understand you're a candidate for alderman.
So are you.
As am I.
I wish you were running for mayor. I've said that very publicly, ladies and gentlemen.
Our mayor's running unopposed,
Yeah.
so he's a terrifying candidate on Halloween to go against. But what do you see as being important for the city of Nashua, Kevin?
Well, I saw this card that you had printed up, and it's really resonating with the folks. I've knocked on a lot of doors. I think this whole issue in Nashua alone, with the reassessments of $1.3 million, there's only one alderman that voted against the reassessments. Now, we know what happens with assessments, right?
Yeah.
You come into the house or you don't come into the house. Either way, the value of your house just went up.
Right.
Magically, wonderfully. And if it went up, that means your taxes went down nuts so quick, right? They're going up. My neighbor, my next door neighbor, said, my house can't possibly be worth this, and our taxes are going through the roof. Now, the last election, the Democrats were going around saying, yeah, there's downshifting, and that's why your property taxes are going up. There's downshifting, interesting. But yet they just increased the budget 13% on the statewide. That's not going to get downshifted? I mean, who are they kidding? This is snake oil salesman. Look, people are up to here with their property taxes. And I think that's the main issue right now. It was under Mayor Donchis that we created, the city of Nashua, the spending cap.
Yeah.
It was under his administration. Why? Why did the alderman do that? Because, hey, wait a minute, this is out of control. And he has a board of aldermen that are doing the exact same thing. Now that the courts do not enforce what the people wanted in a referendum, which was the spending cap. Well, it's unenforceable. Well, how are you going to enforce it? You got to get people in office that will do it manually, like Bill Ohm,
Thanks.
like Mark Cookson.
Well, we have some very good candidates for alderman.
Yeah. I'm not mad. I just want you to know that. I'm a little
Well, I think
excited
we're
about it
motivated,
because
Kevin. I
pe-
mean,
people
I've
are
seen
tired
that
of it.
myself. I have a friend that I bought a very nice, modest condo for a friend of mine who wanted to work in Nashua. He was working in Nashua now, but he lived in Fremont. It was a big commute. So I said, look, why don't you move to Nashua? I said, well, I really don't want to buy a place like to rent a place. I said, well, all right, look, let me make a deal with you. I'll buy a nice condo for you. I'll give you a below market rent, and everything will be good. Because I know the guy's not going to trash the place.
Right.
He's going to be there for the rest of his life. I'm good with that. So, gave him a good price, and then I had to give him some bad news last year because the property tax on the unit, which was $2,000 a year, went up to $3,000
Oh,
a year.
yeah.
Whoa.
And so I have to tell my good friend Peter, you know, I'm not going to raise your rent, but I got to cover what the city's doing to us here. And so I'm thinking, I mean, I could pay the extra $1,000, but I'm thinking about people in that category, people who have modest homes, older homes,
Fixed
smaller
incomes.
condos, fixed incomes.
They're going to be
Right.
hit the worst.
Right. And, you know, I live in a nice condo in Sky Meadow. I got my tax dollars were the same before and after the assessment. They were high, they stayed high. They didn't get any higher.
They didn't go down.
They didn't go down. I expect them to go down. I've lived there for 14 years. It hasn't gone down yet. But
Wait, there's hope, right?
but so you could say, well, the people who are well off maybe can afford it. Yeah, squawk, but I'm not going to complain too much. But I'm really worried about the workforce housing issue because if we're trying to get affordable housing for the people who work the regular jobs and want to keep working and want to stay in Nashua, we got to keep the cost of living down,
Yeah.
the cost of housing down. And having this spike, 50% increase in modest condos, modest apartments, all those rents are going to be going up that amount, probably $100 a month before any rent increases take place.
I know there's some mixed reviews on a couple of issues as well as the Art Center. It's 50-50. Some people are for it, some people are against it. I think it started off at 14 million.
Yeah.
Now it's proposed to be 22 million. Some people are starting to scratch their head. Has any money come
Well, remember, didn't they tell us, right, that they were going to raise $5 million privately before?
Yeah,
and that
before
was going
we
to happen, right?
spend any other
No, it
investment
didn't
into it.
happen.
Where's the seed money that was going to
Right.
kick this off? And now we have a piece of property that's going off the tax rolls for this art
Right.
center.
Drew Sullivan is basically his campaign. He's running for one of the wards. He's a veteran.
Short
His
kid. Yep.
Yeah, he's a
Yep.
good kid. He's stepping up to the plate. His basically his campaign slogan is Nashua's not just Main Street. It's the rest of the town.
Right.
Other people are paying for it. And God bless him for stepping up to the plate. I just think I'm sorry for interrupting you, but wanted to give him a little plug because he's new at this, and there will be people that are new at this. And
Well, we were all new once. Well, maybe
were-
not you. You were born into this, but
We're old now, we were news back then.
yeah.
Am I older than you? Anyway, but I plug to him, Mark Cookson, another a seasoned alderman. Basically, we're all scratching our heads saying, this has got to stop. Even if all of us win, we're not going to be the majority, but we'll be able to speak out for the people of Nashua.
Yeah, I mean, when I was knocking on doors and talking to people, I get complaints that, well, we're watching the alderman hearings, and it's what, half an hour?
Yeah.
Everybody's nodding their head. I mean, where's the debate about the topic?
Right.
What's the impact?
It's like a blank check. Here you go.
Right. I
Move
think
on.
the position is even bigger. I think you guys running now is a bellwether for 20, right? And I think what you're going to see, because we took it in, we took a beating in 18. I mean, 27 state reps from this place, and all 27 went Democrat, right? So we won a special election in Epping with Mike Vose coming back. And I think, to your point, Kevin, I think people are realizing it isn't what was promised.
Right. No.
Right, and so it really becomes incumbent upon you guys that are the point end of the spears now to start showing those differences, and then that's a wave I honestly believe is going to turn into 20, whether we win them all or not. But if we win one or two, Michael Vose, we didn't win a special election in the previous year.
Right.
And now this is the
Michael
first one.
Volson.
Was the first one.
And the Democratic, the state Democratic Party got involved with this local race recently.
Sure.
They threw a nice hit piece out on me, which was nice. I mean, thank you.
You feel slighted.
You know, no, I think Bill's slighted, but poor Bill. Bill's really good. You know,
Yeah.
give him a shot. Give him a shot. Fuck it. You still got time. What? Just 4 days?
That's right.
But yeah, they took a shot, which means they're worried. They're worried because people are onto them. They're onto them that things aren't what they promised, and this whole downshifting, blame somebody else for what's happening locally. People are tired of that. Give me some results, and I think the tax issue is a huge issue. The spending cap. Two gentlemen. I'm walking down the street, and passing out my palm cards, and they've got their dogs, and they've got signs on their lawns, and they're chatting. I just hand them a palm card, and they said, so you're running for alderman, are you? And I said, yeah, I'm, I want to, honor the spending cap. He says, yeah, but you got Donchis in there. And I said, well, that's why I'm running. Very nice man, very, very affable. He's engaged in the city affairs, but we just can't afford him.
Yeah, you have to sort out the must-haves from the nice-to-haves. And you can't, there's never enough money to do all the nice-to-haves.
Right.
So you got to make these tough choices on what you really need for the city and what you can either defer or say, look, it's not going to happen, and look at different approaches.
And tough choices, we're used to that, aren't we?
We run our households that way.
Well, even running in the Senate and in the House, we've come across some issues where we probably have not all agreed on certain topics, probably very strenuously, and yet those tough choices have to be made. Yeah. You kind of got to go with what your gut tells you that is good for the people, and sometimes that's not popular. And when you make that decision, there's going to be a palm card
somewhere
that says, you hate children, or you are the bad guy because of this or that, or bad girl because of this or that, because you made a tough decision. And I'm going to tell you something, that's what you need. You need people that are able to do that have gone through the fire on the state level and on the local level.
Absolutely.
You've all done
Well,
it.
Senator, you talk about tough choices and the hit piece. We will, when you get one, please let me know what it says.
Yes, I want one.
But you showed me a picture of it, and it looked like there was something that was even wrong on it.
It was very untruthful. And that was a tough, it had to do with Avard voted against the kindergarten. Really? No, I actually voted for it. And
okay, I thought so.
And it wasn't I really wasn't, it was one of those tough decisions. I really wasn't excited about it because I thought it was a mandate that would pass down, to the
Unfunded mandate.
Unfunded mandate.
Cities.
Right. That downshifting thing.
Right.
However, there was a caveat where maybe the Keno would offset it, and it would be something that you could do locally, allowing local municipalities to have the option. So that was my agreement, and go for it. And I voted yes, and whatever that palm card said is far from the truth. It is, let's say it, it's a lie.
Right.
We can say that, right?
Right. You
It's
should
a
can.
lie. It was a lie. Prevarication, something to that nature. But when that stuff is there, as you make these tough decisions that there are going to be people that are going to piggyback, and they're going to kick you in the gut, and they're going to try to deceive a certain group of people so that they can gain power. That's what's happening, and you got to get people that can stand that. You got to get people in there that can weed through that aren't just going to play politics. They're going to do what they think is right. We all have our own values.
Right. And it may be, and we've seen this when we were on the campaign trail, and even when I was in the House, people will do things in preparation for a next election.
Yeah.
Right? That it's very calculating, right? You ought to do the job that you have right now. And I remember there was a very good discussion in the House, is that people saying, well, if I do this, then I won't get reelected. Well, you shouldn't be thinking about being reelected, right? If you're doing a good job, then that takes care of itself, right? If, in fact, you want to run
Yeah, you have
again.
to be able to explain the tough choices.
Sure.
Here's
Right,
another
absolutely.
tough choice. What's up with this gambling thing in football?
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting choice.
Well, I got just before you go, Bill. My son does some online gambling, and he won $300, and he got a check, and he was trying to deposit electronically, and it wouldn't take. because the check was Canadian.
Oh.
Right?
Really?
So then his mother got involved and I left. Yeah.
There's
Bill,
a bad pawn card right there.
Well, people like to wager on contests. And prior to my failure to win re-election, I had submitted a bill to allow sports betting in New Hampshire. But my good friend Tim Lang picked up on the language and pushed it through the legislature, signed by the governor. So now we have, like with Keno, we have a local option bill.
Right.
If you like sports betting in your town, well, you can recommend and vote for your town to allow it. If you don't like it, then don't vote it. But it's an option.
Sure.
So we have on our ballot in Nashua coming up this Tuesday a vote on whether sports betting should be allowed in the city of Nashua. And the infrastructure for this has gotten a lot of interest. The lottery did a bid process to say, well, who would like to bid on this possibility of doing sports betting in New Hampshire? And we have the biggest names in not only the country, like MGM and Foxwoods, but the biggest names in the world, like William Hill, the biggest sports book in the world, wanting to bid on the New Hampshire sports opportunity. And after a pretty intensive selection process, Charlie McIntyre, our lottery director, through a very open and objective process, came up with DraftKings as the lead operator for sports betting in New Hampshire. Now, the way it's set up is that it's going to be in 3 different categories. Those of us who like to do squares for the Super Bowl. And
Wait, you do that?
No.
how many squares can I get?
No.
It's a quarter of a square. So there's proposition bets. These are kind of like the squares. You know, how many things are going to happen during the game, how many touchdowns or how many points, or so on. So there's almost like a squares type of proposition that can be done through the lottery terminals. So that's one type of betting. You can bet your Keno numbers. You can also bet your squares. But the main opportunity is the game itself, the win-loss in the game. And then as a secondary, which has gotten very popular, is the in-game betting. So let's talk about the 2 of those. Typically, if you bet on a sports book in Las Vegas, you're laying down $11 to win $10. So you put down your bet, and if you win, you get your $11 back plus another $10 profit. So it's a fairly thin margin for the sports book because half the bets are going to lose, half the bets are going to win, and they get about 5.5% on the action on the book. So the operator needs to be fairly astute to making a very even set of odds that will get the same amount of money betting for the team as well as against the team, because they're just trying to make their 5.5% and let the players decide who's the better handicapper. So we have that. We'll have the sports betting on win-loss. And of that profit that's made by the book under the proposal from DraftKings, 51% of that profit goes to the state, 49% to the book. So it's a really good deal for New Hampshire. And if you get a guy with a sharp sports book who can get a good action on both sides and have it as a fair bet for the customers, it could be a win for everybody.
I heard the governor was just waiting to be the first one to bet on this.
I'll bet on that thing. So that's kind of the traditional sports book. You go down, you think ahead of time who's the best team, how do I handicap them. I know I'm going to get a very good line, and I'll see if I can pick the right team.
And you proposed this bill because you thought it would help out the state. Obviously, 51% versus 49, whatever. That they get a nice take. Was it easy to pass this? Was it easy to propose this when people were coming at you on all sides on this?
Well, I kind of dodged the question because having hidden in the weeds and drafted the language, I kind of passed it up to my friend Tim Lang, who was the gentleman to have to go through committees and take the questions and do the amendments to get it through the Senate. But Tim did a fantastic job, so my hat's off to him. So,
Are there specific venues, Bill, that this is going to be happening at?
yeah, there's going to be 10 sports books allowed, or 10, I should say one sports book, but 10 locations allowed.
How are those chosen?
Yeah.
Like, would the casino be one of those places?
Well, first of all, you have to have the local town to approve it.
Okay.
Oh.
I mean, we're hoping that Nashua would approve sports betting, and I think that would be a location for one of the books.
Sure.
I think it'd be,
They do an amazing job on Keno, from what I understand. Yeah. I only ate there once. I got great wings.
so, and I think in terms of the economy of Nashua, we like eating in Martha's Exchange and all the nice places downtown.
Oh, Tracy and I just went to the surf for the very first time.
Really?
Yum.
It was good.
We got great restaurants.
Oh my
There are.
gosh.
Yeah,
The surf,
sorry.
ladies
Yeah.
and gentlemen, it's worth the wait. Right?
Right.
This is a freebie, okay? We're very fortunate. We got to sit at the bar. That we'll do, yeah, where you can actually eat at the bar. And we had a little sushi, and then my wife, she saw somebody with this big sushi plate, and she looks over. She says, "What is that?" Really, what is that? Sushi. But really, it's a great restaurant. It was my very first time. Shame on me.
And Barbara, I can vouch for nice Chinese restaurants in Nashua. We had a political
Yeah.
conversation a couple
And there are
weeks
nice
ago.
restaurants in all over the state,
There are.
frankly. There are
There's
lots
a-
of nice
Lilac
restaurants.
Blossom is the one I'm
Lilac
talking
Blossom,
about.
yep.
But, Manchester has at Portsmouth. There are great restaurants all over the
Almost
place.
as good as Nashua, yeah.
But you're from Goffstown. What do you think Manchester would do with a sports vote? Do you think they'd...
Well, Manchester certainly seems to be focused on the mayor's race. Manchester has a mayor's race as
Yes.
compared to Nashua, which
Yep.
does not. And that's certainly taking most of the air up as far as what's going on as far as the election. I don't know. I have to confess, I don't know whether the sports betting question is on. And for people who live in a town, you're not having that question put to you, if at all, until March at your town meeting. So it's really the cities that are addressing this first, so that you're going to be able to get on the bandwagon to be one of those locations, because the people who are doing this are not going to want to wait
Right.
Who's
6
the
months.
challenger for mayor in Manchester?
Well, the current mayor is Joyce Craig, and she's running for her second term, and the challenger is someone named Victoria Sullivan,
I've
who
heard of her.
used
Yeah, you know.
who
I've heard
used
of
to
her.
be a
Yeah.
state rep.
Yeah.
She was
Yeah.
a state rep before.
I would say a wonderful state
Yeah,
rep.
she's
Yes.
done a good job. She's a fighter.
And she did very well in the primary, right? She actually won 2 wards
Yeah.
during the primary, and so
Yeah,
she's
overall,
surprised-
she did very
she
well
did
in
very
the
well.
primary. It was
Right.
consistent with what a previous mayor had done, who had defeated an incumbent.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, technically the race is nonpartisan, but I will tell you, you all talked about how things are sort of, and who have we become. The reality is the state that I first ran for office was local office, nonpartisan. They've become partisan everywhere. And in Manchester, even though there's no letter after anybody's name, the sides have pretty much lined up. You can see it in the editorials, the letters.
Right.
It's really too bad. People are just sort of taking the letter and identifying with it instead of the policies. And I can say in my hometown, our last local election for the first time had one of the parties issuing a recommendation sheet for all of the local offices based on party affiliation. And it was really a sad day, I would say. I've held elected offices in Goffstown for, I don't know, probably 30 years. And it's
Wow.
never been an issue, and it is now. It's an issue everywhere.
Somebody pointed out something that's actually happening in Nashua, where on school property, they're being solicited through the union.
Through the union, yeah, electioneering, yeah.
And that's happening in Manchester. They had a
Is that
sports
legal?
team. No, of course it's not legal. And even your own board, your board here in Nashua, boards in Manchester, all have policies preventing electioneering, as they refer to it, in regards to, school facilities, school property, students during class. And the reality is, in Manchester, they received a complaint and placed it on file. That is, did nothing with it. And in Nashua, I know you have a complaint going forward in regards to, pretty blatantly egregious violation of the policy by use of district servers, district email during school time, clearly, electioneering, not much question about it,
So
and
you're an
done.
attorney. What do you think this does for society when laws can be just overlooked over and over and over again? Well, these laws apply to you, but they don't necessarily apply over here. A little wink and a nod. What does that do to our communities? What does that do to our social fabric, our democracy, our republic? What do you think that does when they blatantly break the law and nothing's done?
Look, I think it's a breakdown happening everywhere, and I don't think I need to be a lawyer to answer that question. As a parent, a child, a sibling, all you have to do is ask yourself, if my child, brother, sister, parent got charged with something or was accused of doing something, would I want them treated the same way as the son, daughter, parent of the elected person, of the current mayor, of the biggest pocketbook in town? Would I want them treated the same? And the answer is, I would think we would all say yes. I would hope we would all say yes. That's the foundation of due process, of presumed innocent, that you're treated the same. And unfortunately, it's coming to New Hampshire that you're not treated the same. And I think you see in cities like Chicago that have been under the control of one party for a very long time, it's almost expected that it's not going to be handled a certain way. I talked to somebody who grew up in Chicago, and he said, you got a summer job by doing the campaigning for your local wardman, because that's how you got on the list to get the job. You didn't apply for the job. You went out and you did the campaigning, and everybody just knew that's how it worked. And it's really sort of sad that it's coming to New Hampshire. Granted, the population has grown a lot. I suppose we're not a small state anymore. We're 1.3 million people.
Right.
You know, people compare us to Vermont. Vermont is half the size population-wise. We're the same population as Maine, but the reality is, you know, people should be looking at the candidates for alderman and for Nashua on what they can do for the city, not what color
Right.
they're bringing to the ballot box. And it's unfortunate.
Thank you for that.
Sorry. See, that's what happens when you ask an attorney a question. They just go on, and everybody's like, oh, were they done? Oh, okay, now what?
Hey, we're not on the clock, are we?
Well, one thing that's going on with the city is the high school topic or middle school topic, Kevin.
Oh, yes.
We have the Elm Street Middle School, which is a nice place to see a concert. I've been to the Keefe Center a couple of times.
Yep.
And, but the building's pretty old. It's 80 years old.
Well, if you can turn that into luxury apartments, I'm sorry, you can equip it to being a school that is up to date. And from what I understand, there's proposals for new construction between 80, and then I talked to a couple of people from the Board of Education. Oh, it's actually like 125 to 135 million dollars. In the meantime, you get rid of that middle school downtown where kids, inner city kids, walk. You build another school out of sight. Now they have to be bused. You're talking big bucks, and it's not local. And that, personally, I think that this is another blunder. This is a spendthrift, and properties aren't even approved yet, from what I understand. And we don't exactly have a city engineer anymore. That's another story.
Yeah, it's a hot topic in my district, Ward 9, because the proposed area is on city-owned land in the Cherrywood district of Ward 9
Right.
toward the Hollis side. And, you know, Cherrywood's a very nice residential area, and they're worried about, you know, traffic with not only parents dropping off their kids, but the buses and stuff. So it's a hot topic.
You got kids that have been walking to that school since I was a kid. You know, if you've got the technology to turn those into wonderful luxury apartments, you got the technology to upgrade that building. And enrollment is down.
Right.
Not just in Nashua, Derry, I'm hearing from everywhere. Enrollment's down. And what's up with that? So you're going to build a whole new building.
What's up is down.
Yeah.
Apparently. It's just, I don't think that the citizens are always given all the information.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest thing that we have to deal with. Whether you sit in a committee up at the Capitol or here locally, you feel as though they're being sheltered from all the information, and they're only given snippets. And that goes to your narrative, that goes to your extra spending, and I think that's an issue.
Yeah, because in a business, if your market is declining, you've got to do some cost reductions to remain competitive.
Yeah, you don't build
Sure.
another building,
No.
get more
For who?
inventory.
I mean,
This isn't, you know, if you build it, they will come. I mean, that's not what happens here in the.
Well, it
in the
happens
city.
with bureaucracy.
Yeah. You know, they think, I mean, there's got to be an analysis that there's a demand,
Yeah.
right? Because the other schools are overcrowded, and we're putting them in temporary housing and temporary, you know, schools, and that's not happening at all. And it's a beautiful plot of area over there, you know, right there, over there by that area. There's a bunch of wetlands over there. I mean, it's going to be significant. You get that small 2-lane road,
Yeah.
right, that they'll have to
Buck
expand.
Meadow Road, that's
Right.
There's always a ripple effect to these proposals, and you know, when you start off by not giving the actual numbers and the actual fact that the area isn't necessarily approved, people, you know, they've had it. They're tired of this.
Yeah. You say they're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore?
Something like that. I've heard that somewhere. Yeah. Well, let's hope that they get out and vote this.
Yeah, I think
this,
so.
And like you said, make a you know, a statement made. Look,
Right.
we're not going to take this anymore.
So on Halloween night, I'm going to dress up as a scary politician and knock on some doors.
Yeah, I thought it was called off.
It's Saturday.
Oh, I know. I'm just.
Yeah.
Oh, we just went through that in my town in Goffstown. It was a huge thing about continuing it, and we didn't, and I'm glad we didn't. But it's amazing the amount of energy that was put into whether or not the kids had to trick or treat, possibly in the rain. I mean, it's 70 degrees out there tonight.
Yeah.
I take rain and 70 over, you know,
Cold, and I've been out there with
35
my
and
kids
snow.
when
Yeah,
it's freezing.
yeah.
So,
Well, we'll see what it's going to be like at the polls on Tuesday as Kevin, you and I are out there trying
and I
to,
certainly will be buying both your polls to
Great,
provide
appreciate
you
it.
both moral
Good.
and sign support. Absolutely.
Yeah, good luck to
Yeah.
both of you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Barbara.
And please vote for Bill Ohm. What's your name?
No, not me. Not this time. If you vote for
Next
me, you're in
year.
trouble. Because
Yeah, it's a write-in, and
It's
you've
a write-in
just
at
gotten
this
rid of
point.
somebody.
Kevin Avard
Kevin
is the other
Avard,
one.
that's it.
Absolutely.
So for Steve Negron, Kevin Avard, Barbara Giffen, and myself, Bill Ohm, I'd like to thank you for listening to us and see you next time on The People's View.